the opportunity to work with Dr. Susan Perkins this summer from the Kellogg School of Management. And so I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about diversity and why it matters. So if we take a look at this, we see this nice diversity grid of different ethnic groups throughout the country. And so just thinking about that, taking a look around this room, I mean, I'm different from you, you're different from your neighbor, everybody's a little bit different, right? And so we can relate mostly to the United States because obviously we live here. And so in the United States, we have roughly about 70% of white people. We have about a little over 10% for Hispanics and blacks and less than 10% for Asians. And so thinking about this diversity picture at a global level, I mean, that's a lot of diversity, right? So I'm going to tell you why it matters. So I had the opportunity to work with the research team this summer, and their research question is, can female leaders mitigate the negative effects of racial diversity? And so research has shown that female leaders may play an important role in actually mitigating these negative effects. So when you think about negative effects of diversity, something that we can probably understand and relate to is the Martin Luther King, the Freedom Riders, people like that. These were all ethnic stripe issues. And so if we look at this table right here, or graph, I'm sorry, we see that ethnic fractionalization, as you move farther along, female success is having better outcomes for GDP growth. And ethnic fractionalization is just a diversity metric that looks at the likelihood that you would run into somebody else from a different ethnic group. And so a part of understanding this bigger research question is knowing what diversity actually looks like. And so that is what I am looking at. So I did this by looking at 2 different data sets. So these next 2 pictures I'm going to show are geocoding of the number of ethnic groups within a country. And so this first data set is based on data from James Fearon from Stanford University, and he went on to codify ethnic groups by naming, I want to say it was 822 different ethnic groups throughout the world, and he looked at 160 countries. And so that's a pretty good look at the entire world. I mean, we only have, I think, roughly about 180 or so. And so the World Value Survey, which was my next data set, really captures, how people feel and how people perceive different things from political aspects and so on. And so this really gets a look at that qualitative aspect in addition to that ethnic group codification. And so we see from these last 2 pictures, they're a little bit different. So how can I compare the 2? Are they the same? Are they different? And so that's what I looked at. So I hypothesized that the 2 data sets, they're representative of each other on 3 different levels. So the composition of ethnic groups from a global perspective, the composition of ethnic groups at the intra-national level, and then the number of ethnic groups within any given country. So here are some basic, raw data facts. The World Value Survey, I literally had 330-something odd thousand observations. And so of that, they listed 593 unique ethnic groups, but typographically unique, I should say. And so after, adjusting for duplicates that may have been renamed something different, they had roughly about 250 unique ethnic groups in 98 countries. And so to select my sample, I had 2 tests. So the first one are these countries observed in both data sets. So I had 81 countries that were observed in both data sets. So I lost 95 countries between the both. And then the second test was, does the World Value Survey have language or ethnic group that can be used as a proxy to compare to the other data set? And out of my remaining 300,000 observations, I only had to lose 18. So once I got this data, I had to do my actual experiment and get through it all. So I broke this down into 4 different processes, which included selecting criteria, matching, establishing 100% inter-rater reliability, and then running t-tests. So just to give you a rundown of how this went. So my data, it was like comparing apples to oranges. Maybe I have a bruised apple, maybe I have an apple that might be growing an orange on it. Who knows? And so then once I got my data, it's okay, how can I look at these? How can I cross this bridge to find out if they are the same, if they are different? And so that was my matching component. And then once I was able to match them, then I submitted all of my documents to Dr. Susan Perkins, where we try to establish 100% iterator reliability. And so it's like, is this 3, is this 4, or are we both agreeing that these are 4s? And so, excuse me, when we agreed that they're both 4s, we could conclude that, yeah, they're the same thing, even though they look a little bit differently. And so from that process, I ended up having 81 country year observations, so that's about 45% from what I started with. And so just to give you an example of how this went, this is Algeria 2013. So Fearon had these 2 groups, and as we see, the World Value Survey from an ethnic group perspective and language, it's more than what Fearon reported. And so I had to play this matching game. So this is the World Value Survey, ethnic groups, this is their language. And so I matched Fearon to the World Value Survey. So these groups, for instance, are Berber groups, so I could say, okay, well, Fearon had Berber, so they would go into there. And so that's how that matching went. And then I would make them comparable, and then I would run a t-test. So in this particular case, they were not statistically significant. And so I ended up running different types of t-tests. So this particular one was at the intra-national level, but then I also ran t-tests looking at a global perspective of composition as well as the number of ethnic groups. And so my results shown, which I'm very, very happy about, the World Value Survey sample was representative of the Fearon population composition, which pretty much means that this data, they represent each other at a global level, which is really, really awesome, because now we can use these to actually look at how people feel and bring that into this actual diversity picture. And so my other 2 hypotheses, they were not supported by the t-test results, but this was good. I'm still happy. So my conclusion, oh wait, before I get to my conclusion. So I ran the t-test, as you saw, the 2 groups, they weren't necessarily significant. So I went ahead and I ran the scatter plot of each country. So on this x-axis, we have the ethnic group per country year. So like, for instance, this would be Albania 2002. As you see, they're really close. Even though they weren't statistically significant, they're still really close to each other. Versus, we might have a country like right here where it's pretty far away from each other. And so this is based on the composition. So I set a new threshold, is it in plus or minus 10%. And from that, I was able to actually get some more usable data. And so I was able to recommend these top 4 countries for the research team as their overarching research question to actually explore female to male leadership at the national level in high and low diverse settings. And so they had roughly about 13 ethnic groups reported. China and Japan had 1. India, I think, had roughly about 10. So, and here we have, these had male leaders, these had female leaders. And so there were some limitations. So first off, in looking at the World Values Survey, there was some ethnic group overlap. So like maybe in one year they might just call it East Asians, but in another year they have Chinese or they have Japanese or something like that. So there was some overlap in the ethnic groups that made it a little bit more difficult to actually codify how we could compare this over time. And so that might be an issue if someone were to work with that data in a longitudinal study. And then several of the countries that I did recommend, which I had 50 countries that I could recommend, they did not have more than 1 year observation. And then additionally, Fearon and World Value Survey, 2 different, totally different research methods, different research purposes. So that might pose an issue when looking at some of the different aspects of this diversity picture. But future research can look at the intersection of ethnic group composition, intragroup attitudes and beliefs about tolerance for diversity, in addition to the significant differences between female and male leadership outcomes in different diversity settings. So here's my references because we don't want to plagiarize. And so just, before I accept questions, I just really want to say that SROP was absolutely great this summer. I had a lot of good, intake from the program. I learned new research and analysis methods. I'm definitely looking forward to this PhD thing. And And I have an idea of what the expectations are of a doctoral student. So I want to thank you for your time, and I will be happy to accept questions now. Okay. Yes.
Female leadership. So who are the leaders you're looking at? I mean, you're not just talking about like the president or the top person of the country.
In part, not necessarily specifically the top person, but there are different national leader, I don't want to say groups, but so presidents, prime ministers, queens, things like that. So higher ups, but not necessarily has to be the number one person.
So like Great Britain has a queen and a female queen and a male prime minister. So which one did you look at?
So that is more focused in the bigger research question. I'm really just trying to capture the diversity picture. But as far as that goes, the goal is to be able to compare female to male leadership over time within a country setting, but then also to compare the outcomes in high and low diversity settings without time being a factor. So.
Queen's just a figurehead anyway, so.
Any more questions? Yes.
So the way you set this up, it seems like you're treating the Fearon data as kind of the gold standard, as
Yes.
the criterion, and then the World Values Survey data is sort of used when it matches up.
Right.
But in a sense, the World Values Survey data, you're just asking people what their ethnic or national identity is, whereas the Fearon data in some ways is a lot further removed from people's identities. Why should we take the Fearon data as better than the survey data?
So really with that, the whole idea was James Fearon, he published this article, I don't remember exactly what it's called, but it is on ethnic fractionalization and, capturing this big diversity picture. And so he was able to capture 160 countries and, establish like, okay, we have 822 ethnic groups represented. And so from that, the World Values Survey, the research team wants to use that to actually explore the intragroup attitudes and the beliefs to compare, their perceptions about the national leadership and look at outcomes from different perspectives. And so to do that, we had to try and create this construct validity. So we tried to use these two different data sets to see, are we representing the same population? So that was really the goal. I hope I answered your question.
Let me ask a tiny bit different. In your slide, you showed us that sort of in WVS, the Berber group that Fearon sees as one group,
Right.
people describe as two groups.
Right.
So why should we take Fearon's word over what these people call themselves?
I get what you mean.
Yeah.
So that was actually, I forgot to put it in here, that was one of the limitations is, regardless of how I'm matching, whether you match up or down, either I'm losing diversity or I'm increasing diversity. Because, Fearon, for instance, he just says Berber. But there's, I want to say 260 different tribes of Berber.
Right.
And so that was one of the issues, what type of Berber are you? Who knows? So really, we just tried to focus, okay, we're going to use Fearon as this main diversity perspective since it was published in one of the top tier journals. And so we were kind of just trying to attach to that to see if they represented each other. Any more questions?